I think we're ready to start. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marina Trumpe, Customer Success Lead for Qualibrate. Thank you all for joining our second Customer Success Customer Digital Meetup. Before we start, I would like to express our wish that everyone and everyone's families are doing well. You are staying strong and healthy. On our side, we really feel the need to keep engaged with you, our customers, on digital channels as much as possible. And this weekly meetup, we believe, can help to stay connected, can provide opportunity to learn on new features for you and explore new interesting use cases. On the call, we have also Alan Jimenez, our Qualibrate director, and Martina Fabretti. She's the head of marketing, who made these events actually possible. Thanks a lot. And today's session, we are planning to dedicate to the test data management topic. That's quite a popular topic within customer questions. This is why we decided to start exactly with this one. So we are planning to talk about how do we approach the data management in Qualibrate, on what options and advanced operations are available to support the users when managing test data in most efficient way. Alan will take a lead here today, and we will guide you through the Qualibrate data management features and capabilities. Just a quick technical note, you are all on mute now. You can use Q&A button below to write and ask your questions anytime during the session. We will try to answer those questions within 20 minutes Q&A session we will have at the end of the meetup. But also to make this meeting interactive, Alan will make a quick break during the session, so you can raise your hands and using the button below, and we will unmute you and we will give you an opportunity to address your question actually live. So that's we believe also can make a session more interesting and interactive. And now I will give the stage to Alan. Alan, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Marina. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I think you can see me in the camera. I hope my kid is not going to show up anytime soon because we're working all from home. But thank you for joining, guys. And as expressed by Marina earlier today, the reason that we are organizing these digital meetups is has different objectives. But more importantly, we want to stay connected to you guys. We want to make sure that we keep the engagement with our users so we can bring, let's say, new features to them and explain how to use those features. So it's an opportunity to learn. As much as we have trained some of the users initially on the platform, and we give documentation on our help center, and we also inform you about new features coming into the platform. We also want to take this opportunity to kind of have an interactive discussion to see how you can utilize these features in the context of your day-to-day activities within Qualibrate. And last but not least, we have Marina and myself, which are going to be able to answer specific questions to what we're going to be showing to you today, but also to answer any other type of questions you might have, or maybe some issues that you're facing, or anything that we might help with. So it's an opportunity to provide some support and troubleshooting. So as last session, we introduced this digital meetup series, which is a bunch of sessions that we're having throughout the next few weeks. At the moment, we have identified that total number of 5 sessions, which was introduced initially last week by an introduction of Qualibrate 3.0, which is fairly relevant for those users that are not yet in the newest version of Qualibrate. So we have still customers that are in version 2 of Qualibrate, and eventually they will be migrated into the new version. So as much as this information might be new for you guys, I think it's also important that you learn what are the type of things that we're working on at the moment that eventually are going to reach to you whenever you get upgraded to the new system. Important to know is that we are in the process of migrating already and upgrading customers from 2.0 to 3.0. We started already since 2 weeks ago, and we have plannings towards the, let's say, Q3 this year to get all the customers on board into the new version. If you have more questions about the upgrade and migration, please don't hesitate to contact us. But whomever is your contact person internally within the organization, it's also going to be informed about these changes that are upcoming. So feel free to have a discussion. So as part of these sessions, we had an introductory session last week, which is really about, let's say, the new features that we are bringing into production into 3.0. Sorry. But today is going to be focused on managing test data. How do we approach data sets and some of the features that we have worked on the data sets that are, I think, going to be very useful for your day-to-day activities on testing. Just a bit of a recap for the people that didn't join the previous session. As I said, it was really an introduction of Qualibrate 2.0, but we basically covered all the areas that are really the core areas, functional areas of Qualibrate. And we highlighted a few of the features that are really new on the new stack. So we covered everything around the flows, and more importantly, how do we present the flows, but also the scenarios, and a bit of a difference between version 2 and version 3. And it was really focused on expressing all the new usability features that we published in the new user experience. And then we briefly covered a bit how we are managing datasets in comparison to V2. And this is basically the area that we're going to dive into today. We did a very high level, let's say, overview of how we manage the execution logs and the audit trail of the executions. I believe we have a much more user-friendly way to manage this audit trail, but we also did some really core changes on how we aggregate data towards reporting, which is really important. We also showed a feature which is completely new compared to version 2, which is called tags. And this feature is really powerful in the sense that we can, let's say, add extra dimensions to your content, especially from a reporting perspective, but also helps you to organize your content in a much better way. So you can create some relationships between scenarios, flows, and defects by using tags, and then aggregate that information towards your reports. And towards the end of the series, we also have a dedicated session on analytics and reporting. And then we're going to try to see how we can build reports using the tags. Last but not least, we also did a very quick overview on our defects module. We didn't really go into detail. Eventually, we're going to touch base on more let's say, information about how to customize your defect management lifecycle. So we have capabilities, for instance, to customize your add custom fields or new fields that are very specific to your project. But also have the ability to have a conversation within a defect, share content like attachments, but also have a historic view of the development of that defect. So that's something that we will eventually show towards the other sessions. As I mentioned today, we're really going to be focusing on test data. So the concept of data sets becomes very important. So today is going to be focused really on managing data sets and some of the features that are within the data sets. But I want to split the demonstration of today, and I want to make it interactive. So hopefully you guys have some questions. We're going to deep dive into the data sets and its features. And I'm going to split it into 3 parts. The first one is, first of all, for the people that do not know from a high level perspective how data sets work, we're going to explain how we can manage multiple data sets. And I'm going to also do a bit of a demo on how you can export and import data into Qualibrate, especially if you feel more comfortable managing large volumes of data in Excel. We recently introduced a new feature, which is called the bulk import, which gives you the ability to import, as its name says, a bulk collection of Excel files in case you want to manage all your data in Excel with the use of sheets. We have introduced the feature that you can import everything in bulk and you can create multiple data sets in one single click. So that's a very interesting feature we published in our last release. So I'm going to be showing that to you. As a second step, I'm going to deep dive into the different options that you have when you are managing the data within your tests. And this is where test data management becomes a bit interesting. We're going to explore a bit the most simplistic feature, which is the simple values, literally entering simple data into your test. But then we have more advanced capabilities, like, for instance, depending on your data combination, you can sometimes skip certain steps, and we see this as a data-driven type of logic within the data set. So I'm going to show you how that works. We also have the concept of references, which is related to, it's something similar to what Excel uses for lookups between cells. So you can refer to previous values in the test, in the flow. So you can do relationships between steps, so you don't have to type the values again. This is very useful for dynamic behaviors within your application on the test. And last but not least, we have the advanced functions. And this is where we get the benefits of dynamic value generation. And this is where the power of test data management comes into the play. So if you want to generate random numbers, or you want to generate dates, or even some random strings, we have the ability to do that. So I'm going to show a bit of a demo in there. And in the end, I'm going to touch a concept which we introduced in Qualibrate 2.0. In Qualibrate 2.0 was called iterations, but now we introduced it at a different level because we are able to do a step grouping with chapters or tasks. And I'm going to show you a demonstration of how we can utilize these in a use case. For instance, you want to create multiple quotations in SAP. So I'm going to show you a very concrete example of how to use loops to be able to generate multiple quotations in one go. So all this together are going to be the 3 sections I'm going to be focusing on during the demo. And hopefully you guys like it. So I'm going to go straight into my system. So let me just reshare my specific environment. So Marina, maybe help me. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Qualibrate screen, yes.
Fantastic. So one of the things, as I mentioned before, the first topic is that I'm going to show you how do we have the ability to manage multiple data sets. As you guys know, our flows architecture and our scenario architecture are really built on the concept of having a data-driven approach for testing, which helps to add that flexibility to, especially to non-technical users, to add data logic within their test. So we have a model. In this case, the model would be the flow that represents your model of your process. But then we also create a data container behind it, which you can use to data drive that specific process depending on the business needs, right? So what I did here is that I created one single flow to basically carry on with this demonstration. And I have used a filter so we can look at the flow in an easy way. And one of the things that you will notice is that the flow is already recorded. This flow is specific to SAP, but in reality, as you see, we can support many applications. So this is also applicable for Salesforce or any other web application. But in this case, I'm going to really focus on how can we use the datasets concept to explore different possibilities on creating quotations in SAP. So I hope you're familiar with that concept. So as you can see, we have 4 different tasks, and of which one is the creation of the quotation and then the display of that quotation. And those tasks are comprised by several steps. You can see that some of those steps are really entering values into the system, but also at the end of the create quotation, as you guys know, every time you create a quotation, SAP or any system will give you the output ID of the new document that you have created. And we see that as an output parameter, right? As you know, every time we create a new flow, by default, every time you create it, you get a default data set. And that default data set will contain all the combination of parameters, the steps, and the values of each step based on the data that you have recorded. So here you can see that all the values that I have entered in the system while I was doing recording have been automatically attached to those specific steps. One important thing here is that in this view, on the left side, you have the visibility of all the tasks. So if I go back to the steps, we have a total of 4 tasks. I go to the default data set and I have a navigation pane on the left side, which can help me to select the task that I want to focus on, right? So every time I click on the task, I get the right step combination with the values on the right side. And here you can see that all the values are basically entered there. One of the things that probably for the people that do not know, if you have a bit more, if you want to explore a bit more details about the steps themselves, you don't have to go all the way to the steps tab. We introduce this icon here on the step itself that if you click on it, it actually opens up the specifics of that step, including the description and more importantly, object properties. So you can actually have a direct navigation to the details of that specific step within the dataset view itself. So this can be achieved at every single data set that you create within the platform. Now, this dataset, as I mentioned before, is a dataset that is created out of the box for Qualibrate. And this is where you have possibilities to extend your test data coverage. And you have many, let's say, you can create a new dataset from many, let's say, sections of the application. You can go here to the Datasets tab and create a dataset directly here. Or if you are in the context of one specific dataset, this is the default dataset, I can go to Actions and duplicate it, and you get exactly the same experience. So here I'm going to actually create a dataset called data types because I want to show you some other features of the datasets. But as you see, Qualibrate has a data-driven approach, and we give you as an easy way so you can expand the data coverage by duplicating datasets that are already in the system. So if I open, as you see, I duplicated my default dataset. If I open my data types dataset, you can see that all the data that was contained in the default dataset is also added to this new dataset. This gives us the ability to use the previous content as a template. So we just focused on editing the data that we are interested on. So in the context of SAP, for example, here, if I go to the create quotation task, you can see that we have important data values, like for instance, the sales organization. These are fairly important, especially if you are wanting to execute this specific process step with different enterprise master data elements. Like for instance, you want to execute this process in a German sales organization. So you can duplicate your default dataset and just modify this specific value, and you immediately created coverage for that German sales organization. But you can do the same for the materials, for example. You can see here, you can modify the materials, and we give you quite a flexible and easy way to modify these materials yourself, right? So I can actually change the value directly on the application. But this is where I want to go into more details, because Qualibrate supports multiple options, so you can generate the data directly from the dataset itself. All the values that you see here that are entered are considered what we call simple values. So simple values can be easily edited within this view. You can either do it directly on the, let's say, on the application. So you can literally navigate from one value to another with the tab screen, right? Or you can also, if you feel more comfortable, you can also export this data set, so you can maintain it in an Excel file and then import it back into the system. So just to show you that example, what I can do here is that I can export this data set, and you can see that I have exported an Excel file. And if I open the Excel file, here I open the data set that was just exported. And this export requires an explanation in itself, because there is a specific structure that we export as a template. And there are some really critical pieces of information in here that we need whenever we need to import it back. The most important, I would say, aspect from a business standpoint here is that you have all the data that is part of the system, right? Apologies for that, guys. I hope it's not too noisy on the baby side here. So here you can see that all the data, all the values that are part of the steps themselves, you can see the values in here. But we also add some important metadata about the steps themselves. Like for instance, this is an input type of value, right? We also add the number of the step and the name of the step within what we call the step name part. But this piece of information, the field ID, is actually critical, but this is a technical field which is relevant whenever you are going to import this data set into the system. We can use this information so we can map it to the right value in the import process. Here you can also see that we have the name of the data set. In this case, if I go back to the platform, you can see that this is the data types data set. So we just give an information here of the data set that we want to import it back, and also the ID. Now, I think for you guys, the most important thing is that you want to add additional coverage for your data. And this is where we also have the concept of loops, because in this case, this data set is only entering data into the system in one single go. One of the things that we worked on is that the loops feature is available also at the task level. So you might have the use case that you only want to iterate one specific task. So if we go, for instance, here, into the steps themselves, or the create quotation tab, the task, sorry. Let's imagine that I want to log into SAP once, but then I want to create not only one quotation, but two quotations, right? So what I can do here in the Excel file is that I can add a second loop. So I'm going to add loop number 2. And here you have the task number 1. So because I only want to iterate this task once, I'm not going to add data, an additional data on that one. So what I can do is that I can focus. Let me just collapse this a little bit better so I can see all the steps. I'm only interested on iterating on the task number 2. So in this case, it goes all the way till here, because now you see task number 3 in here. So the only data that I want to iterate on is basically this one. So I hope you guys understand that concept, because what this means is that I'm only looping the first task once, but the second task, I want to run 2 iterations or 2 loops on it, right? And just you see exactly what we mean when we do the import. I'm going to change the sales organization field in here from 2000 to 2001 on the second loop, because the second quotation is going to be related to my second sales organization. And the same goes for the sold to party. So I'm going to use a different sold to party and also ship to party, and maybe a different material, right? So from now, what I just did is that I maintained my data set in Excel. And by the way, I added 2 loops into it. So I'm going to close this file and I'm going to save it. So it's called the data types. And then I'm going to go to my system and I'm going to import the data that I just created. Data types. And here, what happens is that the SAP logon stays as it was, because I basically just uploaded the same data that it was in there. So it didn't rewrite anything because there was no change. But if I go to the create quotation, you can see that we have this icon, which is number 1. This represents the first loop. But then I also have a second loop in here, which basically means that Qualibrate, whenever you play this back, either manually or automatically, is going to execute the first loop, all the steps that are contained within the first loop in sequence. And when it finishes, it's going to continue with the second loop. So it's going to create a second quotation. But now you can see that we have the 2001, let's say, quotation in here, sales organization, which was part of the import, and also a different sales sold to party and different material. So you can see the difference here between the 171 or 004 versus the 3 in here. So in a nutshell, I just show you how we can export the values into Excel, manipulate them there in an easy way, and also import it back into Qualibrate, and have the benefit of also using the loops to be able to generate mass loads of data. Now, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this loop just to remove it from the specific this specific scenario, and because I want to focus now on the specific data types that we support. As I mentioned before, Qualibrate supports different data types. One of them is the simple text, which can be either maintained directly in here or in an Excel file. And by the way, we have other data types that they are also supported in Excel. So I actually have an example later today where we can import really complex data types also using Excel. But just to give you the options that we have, if you want to explore the different possibilities we have on the data types, for every single parameter value that we have in the datasets, you have the option to open the advanced parameter settings. And every time you open the advanced parameter settings, here you can see the different options that you have for maintaining these different parameters. You have a simple text, which is literally just normal static text that you can input it here. We have the concept of a reference, which I'm going to explain shortly, but it really means that you can reference to other values in the dataset itself. And we have the concept of advanced values, which gives you the ability to introduce really advanced logic to generate data. And we support JavaScript as a scripting, let's say, language. So you are able to generate whatever you want. And we give you the power of JavaScript to generate literally any type of data that you might be interested on. Last but not least, we also have a flag here, but it's also a data type, is the skip step. And what this does is that on very specific cases, let's imagine that in your business, in your specific data scenario, if you want to type a value in the quotation type, but for this specific data set, this is not required. You can also, from the dataset, skip that specific step. The behavior is that whenever you play this dataset back, if the dataset said that this step needs to be skipped, we'll just go to the next. The reason we promoted this feature to the dataset themselves is because we don't want to hard code it in the model of the flow. We want to put it in the dataset because there might be a situation that sometimes, depending on certain data combinations, right? Because you're going to maintain your dataset directly here, and some of those data combinations might make some of the steps not relevant. So you have the ability to also skip the information there. And just to give you an example, let's imagine that in my sales organization, right here with this combination of data, the customer reference is not required. If I'm doing a quotation in Germany, the customer reference is optional, right? So what I can do is I can open this tab and skip it. And what this is going to do, it gives you a bit of a feedback in the dataset level to the user that on this combination of data, this step will be skipped, right? So that gives you a little bit of an indication how we can configure the steps from a data perspective to skip it. And we also give you some feedback at the dataset level on how to do that, right? Now, here you can see we have another use case, because in this case, these two steps are basically talking about the same value. So let's imagine that for whatever reason, your process owner tells you like, okay, the sold to party and the ship to party are always going to be the same. So you have the option either to maintain this manually. So if I want to change it to 4, I can change it manually. Or you can also centralize the maintenance. Let's imagine that the sold to party is the guiding, let's say, master data element that you will always have. And this one, you can basically reference back to the sold to party. So what you can do here is similar to what you would do in Excel. You can do a lookup, but in Qualibrate, we call it the reference. So if I open, because I want to do a reference to this value, what I can do is that I can open the details of this step, go to reference. And here, what I can do is that I can have visibility on all the steps that are, or the parameters that are part of that specific data set. But because I want to do a reference to the sold to party, I can also do a search. So I just type sold and then immediately found the parameter value that I'm interested in, because I want to reference to that specific step. And if I select it, you can see that I also populate what we call the validation area here, which brings me the value of that step. So I can also kind of validate it before I configure it and I save the configuration. If I save this configuration, you can see now that if I change this value, the next time I execute this process, this step is going to reference back to the value that I just changed. So this is a simple example, but if you think about it, here, for instance, at the end of the process, I generate a quotation number, right? And this quotation is dynamic because every time the quotation is going to increase, SAP generates a dynamic quotation. And if I go to my display quotation process, I also type a value of the quotation that I just created. So you have two options here. Either every time you run, you have to come in and modify this quotation number based on what you just generated, which is non-scalable and doesn't work for automation, or I can do a reference to the previous generated value. So if I go here to reference and I look for the store step from the previous task, you see here that I dynamically bring the validation to the user. So it makes sure that this is the right reference that I want to add, and I save it. So this process, it's automatically self-sustainable because whatever you generate, whatever quotation you generate on this step will immediately be read back into this step again, right? So it's one of the advanced capabilities we have. Last but not least, we have the concept of advanced functions, right? And I'm just going to explain this concept rather quickly, and then we're going to jump into questions because I see that we have some questions already from the users. Here we have a use case that in this case, we have a date that we need to enter into the quotation itself. This date, basically the business rule behind it is that every time we generate a quotation, we want to add a validity period to that quotation. And the business rule is that this validity period needs to be today's date plus 1 month or 30 days forward, right? So instead of having to calculate this date manually every time you want to run the process, so if I run it tomorrow, I need to come in and manually adjust it to May 17th. I can actually automate that process by using the advanced functions, right? So in order to do that, what I can do here is that I can open my advanced settings for that parameter. I can go back to advanced, and here, I think we explained it in several times on our trainings for users. We have documentation in our help center about some of the advanced functions that we have available. Like for instance, we have formatted date plus 30 dates. So you can copy paste this function literally on your system, right? So for instance, we can paste this function, and here we have the ability to run it. So this run, what it does is that it helps you to evaluate the function that you just copied, because you maybe want to customize it for some reason. Maybe you want to add a different parameter here. Instead of the dash, I want to add a dot. So it generates the function with the dot. So you can customize that, and it helps you to evaluate and gives you the confidence that this is the right result you want to produce dynamically from an automation perspective. And we have documentation of those functions, but also an important mention in the context of these functions is that our upcoming release, which is planned towards the next couple of weeks, I believe, we are going to introduce project level functions that you can easily instantiate directly from this advanced codes editor. And you don't have to know too much of a JavaScript. We're already going to have those functions published as part of the project, right? So one of the things that we're working on is that when I press Control Space, in this case, we have not yet deployed the project functions feature, but whenever we deploy it, whenever you press Control Space, you're going to have all the suggested functions that you have, for instance, today's date or random or whatever, so you don't have to worry about that. But we're working on that. Every time let's say I have entered my function, I validate it, and I'm comfortable with it, I can save it, and then you can see that the function itself has been configured. So every time I run the process, now I have different data types in my data set. So I have simple values, I have skips, I have references to other values within my data sets, and also advanced functions, which gives you the ability to generate data with JavaScript, which is very powerful. Okay, so I'm gonna do a quick pause at the moment, and I need a bit of help here because I have some questions. The first question that I have is that, can you use this Excel also for iterations modes? If you mean the loops, yes, we call the iterations in Qualibrate 3.0 now loops. So similar, I have an example here actually, which you can see on the screen. This is the next step that I want to show you, because here you can see that I have multiple loops, and I'm particularly interested on looping one specific task in this case, which is a quotation task. And here you can see that not only we support in the Excel simple values, like entering a simple value here, for instance, but also we have a specific convention, like similar to what we do in the web application. You can also, we also have support for functions. We have support for functions, and we also have support for reference. And this type of convention that we have is something that we need to train you guys on how to use it. And we have a specific notation for it. But yeah, it is supported. Hope that answers the question. Is the mandatory, there's another question, which is the mandatory option still available? Good question. Yes, it is still available. And that's a good question, because as much as we have the ability to skip steps at the dataset level, if you want to hard code the behavior of the optional step, you still have it in the step level. So if I open the details of the step, you can see that we still have the optional step in here. So you can turn it on and off depending on your, let's say, a specific requirement. As you guys know, if I turn the optional mode within the step, this will mean that this will apply to all data sets. So it's not data driven, it's more step driven, but we still have that capability. So yes, it really depends on what you're looking for. Do we have any more questions? Or by the way, this is the time to make it a bit more interactive. So do we have anyone here in the call that wants to raise the hand?
I think so far we got all the questions on the Q&A chat. But please feel free to raise your hands.
Yeah.
Guys, if there is anything you want to ask.
Cool. So I can continue with the next topic, because at the moment I cover two topics. Just to do a bit of recap, Qualibrate gives you the ability, first of all, from a recording, we automatically generate the model of the dataset, which we call the default dataset. This gives you the structure of the test from a structural perspective and a model perspective, but we also include the data that you use as part of your recording as a template, right? You can still modify it. You can modify the data itself, but we give you the benefit, which is much better, to give you the ability to add more data sets as part of that flow. We have a one-to-many relationship between the flow itself, the model of the flow, and the data set. So you can generate, for instance, another data set. So I show you here that just with a couple of clicks, we have support with 3 different data combinations. And as a second step, I show you the ability to import, export, but also I show you advanced capabilities of the different data types that we support. So the important ones are the skip data types, the simple text, of course, which are the simplest data type that you can enter. References, which helps you to do lookups between the steps themselves. So if you want to reuse a parameter from a previous step, you can do that with the reference. And last but not least, the functions, which there is several use cases out there. And I think one of the most interesting use cases is how can I generate dynamic dates, especially let's say if I want to generate today's date plus 30. So you have the ability to do that, and this will work at playback. Now, one of the things that the other topic that I want to show you guys today is a new feature that we worked on, which we are pretty happy about. It's we have the ability to give you bulk import capabilities for datasets, and especially if you're handling with large volumes of data and you feel more comfortable using Excel by doing that. We have the ability to, instead of generating the datasets manually themselves within the platform, like creating datasets one by one, we just recently worked on the bulk feature, which gives us an ability to have all the authoring of the data itself within Excel. So here you can see that I have I have changed the name of my dataset called DS001 in here. But also we added the feature that if you add new sheets to the dataset, to the Excel file, like for instance, I can copy this sheet in here and I can rename it. Let's say I want to add dataset 4. And here, of course, you have all the benefits of adding different loops. Like for instance, this is a specific case, I want to add more loops. So in this specific data set, you can see that in this specific Excel file, what this means is that I'm wanting to generate in one single go 4 data sets that contain different data combinations within it, and each data set is represented by a sheet in Excel. So instead of having to create these data sets manually, what I can do, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file, and I can go here to my datasets tab, and we publish this feature, which is called bulk import. What this does is that it gives me an ability to choose a file that contains that structure. So I'm going to go to the desktop, bulk import in here. And when I upload this file, we run a background process, which takes basically process everything in bulk. And when I refresh my flow, you can see that based on the sheets that I created in Excel, now I can generate all these data sets in one single go. And all the data sets are going to be configured as per I have done within my Excel file. So if I go and now you open again the bulk import, you can see that for dataset 1, I only added 10 loops for the second task. But if I go to dataset 4, it's a total of 14. So let's explore to see how that was uploaded. So dataset 1, I open it and I go to my second task. you can see that I have 1, 2, and a total of 10 loops in here, which was the import. And by the way, you can see that we also imported the functions. So those are also supported within Excel. So you can export and import functions even from Excel. So they are natively supported in Qualibrate. So if I go back to dataset 4, which is the one where I added 14 iterations, and I go to my create quotation, or 14 loops, you can see that it's not only 10, but I also added the 14 that were added as part of this process, right? So this is a highly requested feature, by the way, guys, by our users, because it gives them the ability to, if you have no Qualibrate license and you have a different team that is handling large volumes of data, the team that is responsible for managing the test data that is available in your specific quality assurance or training systems, you can export that data set structure and then edit it in bulk and generate all those data sets very quickly without having you to click for every single time that you want to generate the specific combinations of data. As you guys know, these data sets are not only adding value to the flows themselves, but if I have a scenario, let's say test data end-to-end, and I add the managing test data flow in here, now you have visibility on all the data sets that have been generated, right? And of course, the more you contribute to that flow from a data set perspective, if you keep adding data sets to it, you basically keep adding options for you to create those end-to-end test scenarios with the respective data combinations. One of the things that we're working on as we speak is that we also want to give you the ability to execute multiple data sets within the context of a scenario. So if you upload, let's say, 100 data sets, you can execute one scenario with those 100 data sets in one single go, which is a nice feature that we are working at the moment. And that gives you an additional capability on top to manage large volumes of data. Okay, so I believe we have reached the point of the full demonstration of the data sets. So I would like to open up the session for more questions if you guys have any. So if you have any questions, you have the ability to either raise it directly on the Q&A section, or you can also raise your hand and I can answer the question live. I can give you a bit of a microphone. Anyone who likes to ask a question, or maybe not specific to data sets, but maybe related to more general questions about Qualibrate or scenarios or flows or reporting? Okay. I don't think we have any more questions, I believe.
Yes, I think all questions are answered so far.
Okay, great. So basically today we covered the managing test data. Just to do a bit of a recap, we covered the part of how to manage multiple data sets, how to import export using Excel, how to do a bulk import, especially if you want to handle large volumes of data. We introduced the concept of data types, which gives us an ability to not only have static type of values within the platform, but we give you the ability to also data drive the flows by skipping certain steps with certain combinations of data. We give you the ability to have references, and we also give you the power of JavaScript to build more complex values using advanced functions. And in the end, we have the concept of loops, which introduces a bit of repetition to your tasks, so you can generate certain business documents in a faster way. So some of the use cases is like, for instance, you want to generate multiple quotations in one go, so loops are going to be your friend. Or for instance, sometimes there are use cases on how to you fill up a table of data with multiple line items. So loops can also be very handy if you group the table steps into that task. As a next step, guys, one of the things that we're going to show in the next sessions, oops, sorry, we want to cover another concept, which is called advanced variables. This sits on top of the data sets, the concepts that we showed today. This is actually a fifth option that we have on top of the advanced functions and the advanced references in datasets. We introduced in Qualibrate the concept of variables, which gives you an additional dimension that you can add into your project to manage cross-project and cross-flow and cross-scenarios variables. And these have utilities not only on the data itself, but also we're going to show some demonstration of how these variables can be used also on object identification strategies. Like for instance, sometimes when you generate certain documents in SAP, these document numbers become really critical to identify an object in a subsequent flow. And we are going to demo how to inject those variables into your object identification properties. So you can also add dynamic behavior into your object identification process. And these are very interesting features, guys, which have utility in all kind of use cases. And we're going to focus on showing that. The subsequent session is focused on end-to-end and then project structure, reporting, and analytics. But I believe, Marina, we wanted to run a poll to see what the level of interest is on these specific cases.
Correct. You have the questions now on your screen already. So please feel free to submit one topic which is more interesting for you out of three, which Alan explained just now. Please take your time.
Cool. I see the response is coming. Thanks for contributing, guys. It's just a couple of clicks, so your help is greatly appreciated. We're still missing some people, so okay, let's give a few more. We're gonna give a minute, I believe. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Can we share the results? Okay. So basically, we're on track with the process. I think the next topic is going to be advanced variables. And I believe one of the things that I would like to encourage you guys is still we're interested in your inputs. So we are going to send a survey later today based on the experience on the last couple of sessions, because we want to get some feedback. And hopefully you can contribute to more of the expectations that you would like to have in this type of session. So I believe this is it. So Marina, you want to close the session? Thanks a lot.
Yes, thanks a lot, Alan. It's really nice to see that platform is developing that fast, and a lot of requests which I personally get from customers I can see already live in the platform. I hope your guys are also excited. And yeah, thanks a lot. We are looking forward to see you on the next session, and we will really appreciate your feedback. Please feel free to fill in the survey. Also, please feel free to contact straight me on email or phone and provide any feedback. Thanks a lot, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.